Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Exodus seminar. This is session number 5, right in the middle of the plagues, which seems perfectly suitable for this time and place. I'm going to introduce everyone briefly, and then we'll jump right into it. On my left, I have Oz Guinness, James Orr, Greg Hurwitz, Dennis Prager, Stephen Blackwood, Jonathan Paggio. I'm Jordan Peterson. We're halfway through the first half of the Exodus story, and away we go. We're in Exodus 9:8, in the midst of the plague, and we're at a point where Jonathan pointed out that the plagues transform themselves from plagues of the lower elements, the earth and the water, into plagues of the higher place, let's say the heavens, and that's symbolized in some part by this verse 9:8. And the Lord said unto Moses and unto Aaron, take to you handfuls of ashes of the furnace, and let Moses sprinkle it toward the heaven in the sight of Pharaoh, and it shall become small dust in all the land of Egypt, and shall be a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast throughout all the land of Egypt. And they took ashes of the furnace and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses sprinkled it up toward heaven, and it became a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast. And you see, the magicians of Egypt, their power weakens with each successive plague. So here what happens is the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boil was upon the magicians and upon all the Egyptians. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had spoken unto Moses. And this is an illustration, as we pointed out to some degree before, of a very profound psychological point, which is no matter how deep the pit of hell you've dug for yourself with your tyranny, there's always one stupid and blind thing that you can do, at least, that will open up yet another pit under you. And that's why, mythologically, I would say, and symbolically, hell is a bottomless pit.
It's very important to do one quick thing on the Hebrew. It does not say stiffen, or what was that the word in the King James? Harden. It is clear what it says. This is easy. Vayechazek. The word chazak is in modern Hebrew as well. It means strengthened. He strengthened Pharaoh's heart, which goes back to my original point. He gave him free will. Mm-hmm. He did not deprive him of free will.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's a crucial point.
Crucial
point.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I wonder why it was translated as hardened, or even maybe hardened didn't mean exactly the same thing at that time in the translation.
That's right. That's just as when King James says, "Thou shalt not kill," for the commandment, which is "Thou shalt not murder." In those days, kill was murder.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but you can understand hardening of the heart as a strengthening of the will, in the sense that it's like a crystallizing of the Pharaoh's will. Like his will gets locked in, basically. And so you can understand
it's still up to the Pharaoh.
It's up to the Pharaoh, but it's like
as long as we know it's up to the Pharaoh.
Yeah. No, that's a very important.
Of course, there's also the point that it's still saying the Lord is behind this, and so I think the contention there is that the principles of reality itself are being shown forth here, and Pharaoh is himself within them. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't undermine his free will, so to speak, in the way that you're saying so well, Dennis, but rather it shows that it is itself, you might say, conditional upon these principles.
Mm-hmm. Well, he strengthened him to be the fullest version of himself.
Fair way.
Yeah, well, we'd also say, if we're going to accept the principle that a universe with free will in it is better than one without, even though that might allow for the emergence of evil, then we have to be willing to assume that if God is allowing even the Pharaoh free will, that is in some sense a reflection of something that's in the highest place.
Yes.
Right? And I think you can make a pretty good case that for will to be as free as it can possibly be in the metaphysical sense, it has to be able to span the entire dimension of choice between radical evil and radical good. And so...
But you remember in the first 5, it's Pharaoh who does it. And now, after the second 5, the Lord does it to him. In other words, he's driving him to the logic of his own settled choice. which is a biblical form of government, of judgment.
Right. Well, that's the way to understand judgment. Even in the New Testament, you have the sense in which judgment is the consequence of your own decisions.
Right.
It's the natural consequence of your own actions, and that
And
brings
a
about
reflection of your own actions. And there's warnings about that consistently in the Sermon on the Mount, right? That you're going to be judged by the criteria that you use to judge others, that's inevitable. Because they reflect it back to you, and you also practice it, and then necessarily and inevitably apply it to yourself.
And the fruits of your actions ended up almost being sometimes a judgment that is brought back upon you. But if you take drugs, you could say someone is a coke addict, and then you could say, well, God is judging you, but the judgment is just the behavior itself playing itself out on you, right? The world God created the world with an order. If you break that order, the consequences come. So you could call it.
That's my argument. You'll love this, because I love what you just said. So when I teach the Ten Commandments, I ask people, so what's the punishment for violating the Sabbath? And what I'm about to give you as my answer is heartfelt, because I know it from my own life. The punishment for not observing the Sabbath is you miss the Sabbath. And because if you keep it regularly, as I do, and you miss one, you really miss it.
What do you miss, like personally?
Oh, the rhythm of my life is
So
that one day a week I leave the world. And if I don't leave the world that day of the week, 14 days go by when I have lived a secular life, and it gnaws at me.
This is such a fundamental principle, because it's so easy to approach a religious text as if this is somehow, a myth someone made up that, about a God that is external to reality. He's going to punish me, but that really what this text, I think, is about is precisely this principle, is showing us from within what the principles of the real are. And this dictum that you've just given us about the Sabbath, which is so beautiful, this occurs also in Plato in the Gorgias. He says, it is worse to commit than to suffer wrongdoing. This is taken up by Boethius and others who argue that, goodness is its own intrinsic reward. I mean, you are one with the goodness you have done, right. Just as evil is its own intrinsic punishment.
And so that's reflective of an intrinsic moral order.
Yes.
Yeah. So 9:13. And the Lord said unto Moses, Rise up early in the morning, and stand before Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God of the Hebrews, Let my people go, that they may serve me. For I will at this time send all my plagues upon thine heart, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, that thou mayest know that there is none like me in all the earth. For now I will stretch out my hand, that I may smite thee and thy people with pestilence, and thou shalt be cut off from the earth. And in very deed for this cause have I raised thee up, for to show in thee my power, and that my name may be declared throughout all the earth. As yet exaltest thou thyself against my people, that thou wilt not let them go. Behold, tomorrow at about this time I will cause it to rain a very grievous hail, such as hath not been in Egypt, since the foundation thereof even until now. That's an echo of your point that this is a degeneration back to the pre-cosmogonic chaos. That's the symbolic term, I believe, that existed before the dawn of civilized order. So it's a real disintegration of order itself because of the tyranny of excess order. So send therefore now and gather thy cattle and all that thou hast in the field, for upon every man and beast which shall be found in the field, and shall not be brought home, the hail shall come down upon them, and they shall die. He that feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his cattle flee into the houses. And he that regarded not the word of the Lord left his servants and his cattle in the field. And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch forth thine hand toward heaven, that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, upon man and upon beast, and upon every herb of the field throughout the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven. And the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with the hail. I presume that's lightning. Very grievous, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt, since it became a nation. And the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail smote every herb of the field, and brake every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, was there no hail. And Pharaoh sent and called for Moses and Aaron, and said unto them, I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. So the Pharaoh is starting to repent. Entreat the Lord, for it is enough that there be no more mighty thunderings and hail, and I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer. And Moses said unto him, As soon as I am gone out of the city, I will spread abroad my hands unto the Lord, and the thunder shall cease, neither shall there be any more hail, that thou mayest know how that the earth is the Lord's. But as for thee and thy servants, I know that you will not yet fear the Lord God. And the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was bald, as the crops were ripe. But the wheat and rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. And Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh, and spread abroad his hands unto the Lord. And the thunders and hail ceased, and the rain was not poured upon the earth. And when Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunders were ceased, he sinned yet more, and hardened his heart, he and his servants. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, neither would he let the children of Israel go, as the Lord had spoken by Moses. So you see the narcissism there, in some sense the psychopathy of tyranny, one of the hallmarks of psychopathy, as well as the narcissism that accompanies it, is absolute failure to learn from experience. And so it's quite interesting, because you think of the psychopath as someone who takes advantage of others for his own benefit, but the psychopath also takes advantage of himself for his own benefit. And so psychopaths always betray their future selves. And so it's a counterproductive mode of existence. And they do that by getting in the same trouble over and over and over and over and over and over.
It's also short-term gain over long-term planning, right? The planning of the Lord in this is generational. And the Pharaoh, every time he has a moment to revert to his sinful ways, he does immediately. It's a short-sightedness.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, on purpose, there's a sense in which God is presented as someone who made a promise to Abraham, and now he's gonna make that happen. And the Pharaoh constantly is going back and forth. He says, yes, I'll let them go. No, I won't let them go. Yes, I'll let them go. The one thing I wanted to point out, though, that I think is important in terms of narrative, in terms of seeing what's going on, is what we're seeing now is something that we could call like the hostility of heaven. We're going to start to see aerial phenomena, that is the manner in which heaven can be oppressive. And it appears as this radicalization of two opposites. So we have to understand that when the Israelites leave Egypt, they will be guided by a calling of water and then a calling of fire. Right, a calling of cloud and a calling of fire. And now we see the same thing, which is that there's water and fire falling from heaven, but now it's in this sense, it's destructive. It's like this destructive aspect of the separation of heaven and earth. Whereas later we'll see how the same phenomena are now guiding the Israelites out of Egypt.
That's really interesting, Jonathan, because you look in verse 24, the way he describes it, that the hail and the fire is such as there were none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. So the idea is this is kind of having this cataclysmic impact on Egypt as a nation. And so the parallelism there, the disintegration of Egypt as a nation, this is looking ahead to the formation in chapter 12, chapter 13 of Israel, the people of Israel, the constituting of the people of Israel as a nation.
So it also means that those columns that you talk about, if they're followed and in their proper place, then they're the most then that is a representation of what's most beneficial.
Yeah, you can see it. It's like that opposites have a function to guide you in their opposite. Like it really is like a yin yang, by the way, especially when they leave and they follow the fire and the water. It's like there's water during the day and there's fire during the night. So there's light at night and there's a dark, wet cloud like during the day. And so you can see this kind of balanced yin yang thing where now it's these two opposites are just like crashing, mingled together to just destroy the
What's interesting
food.
for me, Dennis.
Fire and water.
Yeah.
Right.
Dennis said something.
The clashing of opposites. Sorry, Greg.
Oh, no, sorry. So yesterday, Dennis was saying about miracles, right? That no one's convinced by miracles because miracles are all around us, right? So if you're alive and awake to the world, you're alive. And so a lot of that is one's orientation to what's happening externally. And what keeps happening is it's fire and water, but your orientation towards it, like how you interpret and orient to it, is what determines in some ways whether it's chaos or chaos or order, right? Because it's sort of the same imagery, right? And the moral orientation towards it and how it's called is what sort of manifests and calls it forth, either in a way that's healing and revivifying or that's damaging and chaotic.
Well, the Taoists stress that a lot when they talk about the way of the Tao, which is it's in some sense it's a precise and disciplined way, but it's also an easy way, because to be in the Tao, which is to be in that meaningful moment, balanced properly between chaos and order, is to take the path that manifests itself as best with grace. And so you're still coping with these titanic forces of chaos and order in the Taoist worldview, which you always are. And chaos is what you don't know in some real sense, and potential and order is what you do know that's already structured. But to put yourself in the proper place is, I suppose, that's between those two pillars of opposites, right? And that's also the most meaningful place. And it really is, because what we experience as the most meaningful place is the meeting place between what's actual and what's potential, right? Because the actual gives us the structure, and we can use the actual to structure the potential. And when we're doing that optimally, I think what our nervous systems signal is that when we're doing that optimally, we feel like we're in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time.
That's human development. Was it Piaget or Kelly that was the accommodation and assimilation?
That's Piaget.
Piaget, right? Yeah. So that's also the process by which we encounter the world and generate.
Yeah.
And we'll see these two columns, we'll see them appear as we move through the book. We'll see them appear in different places. And not only here, but later, and more in Scripture, there's this idea of the two columns, all the way to the two columns of the temple, which is the column of foundation and the column of Boaz, who is like the one who married the stranger, right? So there's this difference between the foundation and the wild, or whatever.
The other thing you see here in this plague is the political disintegration, the people beginning to doubt the dictator. And eventually it'll be his own courtiers against him. And then he's finally isolated, which so often happens with dictators.
And God gives the Pharaoh the opportunity in this one. And also, it's interesting because he says to the Egyptians, it's like saying to the Egyptian, you have a chance now. If you believe this God, then your cattle won't die. And so it's actually turning the people against the Pharaoh, because those that listened to God, the cattle was saved, and those that didn't, they...
And it's interesting, the psychology of the tyrant. The Pharaoh's change of heart is his sort of repentance is qualified. He says, I've sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. So he sees that it's not just him. It's my entire nation. That's the problem. It's my so that's an interesting.
Here's a truly fascinating thing about the Hebrew, where it says stiffened. He stiffened his. First of all, he did it to himself. He stiffened his heart. Okay, so. I hope I can make this clear, and if I do, you'll find this fascinating. The word is vayichbad, which literally means made heavy. Okay, there's no one would doubt that. I'm not reading anything into it. Kaved means heavy in Hebrew. Now, here's the beauty. Honor your father and mother. The commandment is the same exact verb. Honor literally means make heavy. You
So to
should
take up
hold
the
your
burden?
parents. No, you should hold your parents in a heavy way. That's what it really etymologically means. It's correct to translate it as honor, but it literally means make your parents heavy in your eyes. So here's the killer. There is another way of therefore translating this, and it just occurred to me today. I wish when I wrote my commentary, I realized this. You can actually translate this as Pharaoh honored his heart and didn't send the people out.
Dennis, you eventually go one higher. The glory of God is the same word. In other words,
That's
God's
correct.
glory
That is right.
the ultimate weightiness
How'd you know that?
in the universe. No, I think,
He's smart.
compared with
He's smart.
Yeah.
compared with Milan Kundera.
Me know.
But you've got the reverse of Milan Kundera, the unbearable.
That was precious.
Dennis knows some stuff.
That is clear beyond
It's a
doubt.
constant shock.
That's correct. That is the word. That is exactly for honor
The
and glory.
ultimate reality
Yes.
of reality has weightiness.
That's right.
Yeah, well, we make allusion
Nietzsche,
to that too.
when God dies, everything becomes weightless. Nietzsche.
Right. Well, we say we do reflect that in the connotations of our words. We say this is a weighty matter, or those were weighty words.
Gravitas.
And that's right. And that it has gravitas, and that indicates like it's massive and solid.
Well, an anchor, something that it's also something that doesn't move.
In some ways,
that
it's distilled into its primary essence, right? If something's dispersed, right, it's less.
So it's concentrated.
That's right. It's the purest concentration, right? So
Another thing that I find interesting here, I'm trying to stress test the text in a sense that doesn't sound prideful in relation to does this map onto my own experience, or in what way can I understand this through my own experience? And we were talking yesterday about sort of putting ourselves in Pharaoh's position, so to speak. And, I think it is just true. Like, it is, the reform of the self is hard. And, the weight of our own habits, the weight of our own character, and the way in which that compounds, you say, well, I know I have these faults, these mistakes. And
I'm not going to do this anymore.
It has a little.
Your heart.
It has a little problem in my life, and then it got big. I missed work, and then that was okay. I got a reprimand, but then I lost the job. Then my family fell apart. Then it's it's easy to dismiss Pharaoh. Much harder to dismiss ourselves.
Yeah. When you make a habit, what happens there's a neurophysiological process. So when you first encounter something novel, so you don't have habits in that domain, a large part of your brain is metabolically active. And it's because you're not very good at it. And there's no specialized system developed to deal with that anomalous occurrence. And then as you practice, less and less of your brain is involved. It moves from the right to the left, and then from the left frontal backwards, till you build a little machine, but it's not a machine, in the back that automatizes that. So if you practice a sin, let's say, you build a little machine, but it's not a machine because it's alive. It's more like a sub-personality. And then when you want to take that thing out, it's not particularly happy. And it will respond in many ways. Well, look, it couldn't animate you. The habit couldn't animate you and shape your perceptions if it wasn't a spirit. And so you build in those habits, and you allow the spirit that constitutes those habits to not only inhabit you, it's more than that, because that little neurophysiological mechanism, in order for it to grip control of your perception and action, it has to shut down all the rest of your brain, because otherwise you do something else. So if it doesn't have the capability to shut down the rest of your brain, it couldn't implement itself. And so when you go to battle against that, not only is it alive and it causes pain to kill it, but it also is capable of shutting down the rest of the brain, or it wouldn't have got purchase on you to begin with. And then it's even worse than that, because you can't kill the damn thing once it's in there. The best you can do is build another machine to shut it down. And then when you get stressed, the new machine that shuts it down is most likely to collapse first, and then it'll pop back up.
Which is why precisely in a way the question here is, the question, I was thinking, all right, what does an atheist find in Exodus? If you stress test from this angle, you say, all right, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in any of this. And you say, okay, fair enough. How do you move on your own terms from, being entrapped by your bad habits and the weight of the world and depression and whatever else? I mean, is there any movement possible? That's, getting God out of the picture doesn't change the problem of where you are, right? You're still left with that. And so what's being said here is something like, how do you open yourself up to that which could be genuinely transformational, which you cannot do in your own. That's in a way what God's order is.
It's exactly what scientists face all the time. So, because I did a lot of data analysis as a social scientist, and I learned a lot about statistics. And the thing about doing statistics is that if you don't do it ethically, it doesn't work. It's not arithmetic. I worked with psychiatrists who generally aren't researchers, and they would get someone else to do their data analysis. It's like, you can't. It's not numbers that you run an algorithm on and you get the facts, ma'am. That is not how it works. You make an ethical choice at every single decision point, and there's probably one decision point per number in the columns and rows of numbers, thousands of them. You have to look at all of them. And if you don't, you will not find anything. And you won't find anything in the numbers unless you actually want to find something. And so even as a scientist, because one of the things you have to do if you're a scientist is you look at the data set and you think, hey, if I publish this, I get to be a professor if you're a graduate student. So it's really, there's a lot of pressure there to find in the numbers something that will reveal a truth that will serve your career. Like, that's a really powerful force. And you want to build in mechanisms to stop yourself from doing that. But if that's what drives you, then you'll find something that's false, and then you'll pollute the whole literature, and you'll chase that chimera maybe for the rest of your career. And so you have to set up. So even if you're an agnostic or an atheist and a scientist, you still have exactly this problem. It's like, well, how do you keep your power-mad careerism from interfering with your statistical analysis? And that is the revelation of redemptive truth by the object, right? Because hypothetically, in the data set, part of what's represented is the transcendent object, because otherwise it couldn't correct your stupid theory. You couldn't use it to test your hypothesis. And to test the hypothesis is if the hypothesis fails, then the object that's encapsulated in the mathematics objects to the hypothesis and takes it out. And so that is a collapse of the conceptual structure, and it's something you're actually searching for if you're a real scientist.
But listen to Dennis, the first day you introduced two tyrants and the inner tyrant. And I love the rabbi's picture. The first time you do wrong, it's a gossamer thread. You do it again, it's a stronger thread, and eventually it's a massive rope.
Yeah, and then it's
and
a
you're
noose.
bound.
And it travels backwards. I mean, the machine you're talking about, like, let's think of that as a possession, right? It travels from prefrontal cortex back towards the lizard brain. So you're talking about this as an uncreation, right? What's happening here is it's a reverse. And what's so interesting, I was thinking about new scientific technologies for solving OCD, depression, suicidality, right? And so when you look at ketamine or psilocybin use that they're dealing, what that does is it lights up both hemispheres of the brain simultaneously.
It is a reversion to pre-cosmogonic chaos, those treatments.
And in doing so, right, it liberals all the chains that are these ingrained ruts, right, that habits run in with all the neurological change in pathways. It elevates you for a moment into a more chaotic state that lets you have access to more pathways.
That's super important because we often only think of the ascent up the mountain, right? It's like that's what we're moving towards. Moses is going to go up there, is going to get the law. We're going to establish Israel. But before they have to go through the sea, they have to go through this. And like there's this, in Christianity, of course, we have this thing as baptism, which is the idea that before you build something, you have to
be reduced.
You have to be reduced to death. You have to go down into death. And as you come out, then all of a sudden
you have to return to the potential.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and that's true. There's no, and Piaget knew this, there's no learning without the transformation of the pre-existent conceptual structure. And it's partly because all our conceptual structures are complete. Like we completely map the world, but the map is low resolution and erroneous. And so when you learn something new, not only does something new come in, but something that was there already has to die. And so there's always a tyranny, always, whenever you learn something, there's always a tyranny and then a desert. And the desert is also the place where where there's manna and the place where there's the possibility for guidance, but also the possibility for ideology and idolatry. It's the constant pattern of learning, and
that's the miniature, like, you know, the hero's journey, like we talk about in grander ways. But almost everything, it's funny, one of my friends had this observation to me. I was talking about, you know, having conversations across whatever the aisle is, right? I'm not being specific on that. But every one of those is like a mini hero's journey when you have a conversation with people with opposing views, right? It's not just these big moments where we have these moments of healing crises in our life. You go have a conversation, you open up your Rogerian nervous system to new information, and then you sort of bring it back, and then
it breaks you up a little bit.
Yeah, and then when you come back, you re-get your balance. You have to be sort of willing to be off balance in some ways to embrace an opposing view in full, and then you can come back and see what parts of where you've come from are dead, right? And which parts are alive and which ways you've overcompensated. It's a constant mediation. And it's like these tiny little hero's journeys that we do. That's the Piaget.
Well, and it's also the case that if you do the tiny little hero's journeys along the way, then you're immersed in a meaning that's optimal instead of terrifying, because that's that sense of meaning. So meaning in some sense has two poles. One is chaotic catastrophe and anxiety. It's like, that's way too meaningful, too much multiplicity, way too many choices. It's like, so that's too much transformation. And then too little is, well, you're stagnant and nothing changes at all. And so the sense of meaning is the calibration of the distinction between anxiety and enthusiasm. Well, you can also become too enthusiastic. That's mania. So you want to calibrate it so that you're optimally engaged. And if you're optimally engaged, then the heroic revolutions that you're undergoing are continual and incremental, and that means you don't ossify to the point where you have to have a bloody trauma before you learn something.
It's stretching. It's the same as stretching physically. If you're an athlete, like, or as you age, you want to stay flexible. You have to practice flexibility.
And it's inscribed in Scripture. This is inscribed in the very first act of creation, where there's the 6 days of creation, the 6 days of work, and then there's the 7th day of rest, where things are supposed to settle, and then we start again. And then that manifests itself in the week, but then it manifests in the year. Usually, most traditions will have some kind of carnival where everything breaks down. Like we have Purim, where it's like we spin and we get drunk and we fall down. In Christianity, we have Mardi Gras, and then
the New Year's ceremony is the death of the old year and the beginning of the new season. And
so
that's
if you have a little valve where you let things break down to a certain extent, then it avoids the massive buildup of tyranny. So you need these little cycles to avoid.
It even happens when you're fasting, to some degree, because when you fast, and this is something very cool about fasting, and of course it makes perfect sense from an evolutionary perspective, is when you fast enough so that you start digesting your own body tissues, the body tissue that you digest first is the damaged tissue. And so then you can die a little bit, because that's what happens when you're starting to consume yourself, is you die a little bit, but the consequence of that is that you live longer. There are studies on rats showing that if you have them fast regularly, and that keeps them at a suboptimal body weight, they'll live up to 40% longer.
But they're also way more irritable.
Well, yes, they're that's right.
You got irritable rats,
and you're like,
great,
and angry
great,
rats,
another year with
forever.
An angry rat, right? Gotta be careful.
Yeah.
Is that true, by the way? Are they more irritable?
No.
Not at all.
He just knows he's more irritable.
Because I'd never heard that, and I was curious. Anyway, how would you know if a rat is irritable? Now that I think of it, they're not exactly benevolent.
They're weightier.
General,
they're more condensed into their essential ratitude.
My goodness.
All right. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go in unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart, and the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs before him, and that thou may tellest in the ears of thy son and of thy son's son, what things have I wrought in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that ye may know how that I am the Lord. That's Exodus 10, 1 and 2, by the way. And Moses and Aaron came in unto Pharaoh, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord God of the Hebrews, How long wilt thou refuse to humble thyself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else, if thou refuse to let my people go, behold, Tomorrow will I bring the locusts into thy coast, and they shall cover the face of the earth, that one cannot be able to see the earth. And they shall eat the residue of that which is escaped, which remaineth unto you from the hail, and shall eat every tree which groweth for you out of the field. And they shall fill thy houses, and the houses of all thy servants, and the houses of all the Egyptians, which neither thy fathers nor thy fathers' fathers have seen, since the day that they were upon the earth unto this day. Another reference to the to the origin. And he turned himself and went out from Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's servants said unto him, How long shall this man be a snare unto us? Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Knowest thou not yet that Egypt is destroyed? And Moses and Aaron were brought again unto Pharaoh, and he said unto them, Go, serve the Lord your God, but who are they that shall go? And Moses said,
By the way, tyrants don't love their people. This is a rule.
Yeah.
Right.
Hitler had utter contempt for the Germans. Stalin was a Georgian. He couldn't care less about Russians. It is a fascinating thing here. Mao couldn't care less about Chinese. And there is no exception I know of a tyrant loving his people.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's antithetical to it's antithetical to the spirit of tyranny. Certainly, Hitler regarded the Germans in the waning days of World War II as having betrayed him.
Yes, that's right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's crystal clear.
Yeah.
They didn't deserve someone like him as a leader, and you could tell that by their cowardice. They're unwilling to make the final sacrifice on his behalf.
On his behalf.
That's the end point of resentment, right?
Why the end point of resentment?
Because at a certain point, everyone betrays you. That's
Right.
part of the bottomless pit.
Right. Yeah, well, you see that in figures like Stalin, and this is why the whole notion that power can bring about a kingdom that's worthy is so false. Is you start to understand the position that a true tyrant is in. Is everyone around him lies to him all the time because they're terrified of him. That's certainly the case for someone like Stalin, because if you were around him long enough, you were dead.
You're dead.
And then they're all sycophants of the worst order, because they're just as tyrannical as you, but not as courageous, which is really something, because like a bully henchman is even worse than a bully, because at least you can hit the bully, but the bully henchmen are hiding behind the bully. So they're just bloody awful. And so then you're paranoid because you're a tyrant, but everyone is lying to you all the time. And so then you have contempt for them, and no wonder, because they're all lying. And it's just... To rule as a
Interestingly,
tyrant is
though,
to be
Pharaoh's
the king of hell.
guys didn't lie to him.
But I think we see a beautiful.
They told them.
We're seeing
Egypt
a
is
beautiful
being
narrative
lost.
shift. Like the narrative is really very subtly and nicely put in, where God said at the beginning, it's like the Egyptians are going to be on your side in the end. Watch this. And you're like, how's this going to happen? And then you can see it. First, God gives the possibility to the Egyptians to save their cattle. So those that listen to God get to save them. Those that listen to Pharaoh don't. And now they're like telling the Pharaoh, yeah, maybe you should let these people go. And you can kind of see it happening, where by the time the people are giving them gold, like to go, you're like, okay, we've seen this like nice narrative shift.
Right.
towards
So you're
that
thinking
moment.
that when the Israelites take the spoils of the Egyptians, and maybe that's part
At
of
the end, it
parcel.
says that they give.
They give.
Oh, yeah, they
well,
give.
because
Oh.
maybe. So are they guilty, or do they realize that the Hebrews are doing the right thing? It's like, and are they giving it in? They're giving it voluntarily. The fact that it's the women that are asking really implies, in some sense, that they're giving it voluntarily. It's like, here, take this.
Yeah,
We
well, it
know
doesn't
you're right.
say. Yeah, maybe it's you're right. Maybe it's they're saying get out because this has to stop. Like it's not clear.
Or if we give you enough, maybe we won't get hurt anymore.
That's right, something like that.
But isn't Moses the first great leader in history to be called a servant? Not only of God, but of his people. And you think we have elites today who call people deplorables? We got that same, it's not
I wonder
Hitler
if,
or Pharaoh, but you've got
I think it's
part of the elitism.
Yeah, well, I think it's made
is-
more and more explicit. You see it in the Mesopotamian myths, religious myths that underlie the notion of the sovereignty of the empire in Mesopotamia, because the good emperor, the good Marduk, has eyes all the way around his head, and he speaks magic words. But there's nothing in the text itself that says something as explicit as that means that you should pay attention to the lowest and serve the lowest. So it's starting to dawn in a way, but it's a sequence of progressive realizations, revelations in some sense. So
it's interesting you're talking about the henchmen or Stalin. That's the perverse nature of Marduk with eyes around your head. It's like everyone's coming for you, right? It's the leader, like you're seeing all around you that you're vulnerable in all quarters, right? It's the perversion of that.
Right. That's right. So paranoia is the resentful inverse of attention. Yeah, right. So attention. Attention. Right. Subverted to the pathological. That's paranoia. That's interesting, because if you ever deal with someone paranoid, it's good advice if you ever deal with someone paranoid is, first of all, especially if they're dangerous, do not lie to them. Because they're hyper alert. It's part of paranoia. And you can induce paranoia in someone by giving them enough amphetamines. It will make someone paranoid, but
that's your story.
Hyper alert.
At McGill, of the guy you lived by who kept trying to sell you his microwave.
Yeah, well, that's right. I had to pay tremendous attention to him
and be honest, even if being 100%. Honest meant that you could get killed almost, because it was a huge threat. But you were firmly and carefully directly honest.
Well, I had a paranoid client at one point who had like 4 restraining orders against him, and people would offend him, bank tellers, for example, because they'd pull a bureaucratic power stunt on him. And he was unbelievably, acutely sensitive to such things. And he would say, I'm going to be your worst nightmare.
And then it was true.
Yeah, and it was true. Yeah, he was like an avenging angel, that guy. And it was very delicate operation, always talking to him, because he was just watching you just like a hawk, right, for these. And people do manifest micro expressions if they're lying, and generally you're not acute enough to catch that, although people can be trained to do it. But if you're in a hyper paranoid state, and he was literally paranoid, then they're watching you just with every suspicion in mind and on hyper alert. And if you don't lie, you might wend your way through. But
magicians, when magicians call forth someone from the crowd to be their magician's assistant, they have a way of reading and assessing who's the most ordinary looking person. You don't want a schizophrenic up, because they're keying to different non-socially conventional cues. So you can't have slight...
You can't misdirect their attention reliably.
Right, because they're looking at other things. And so you want them... people have a misconception that mind control cults take advantage of people who are sick and broken. What you want are incredibly healthy people in times of transition, because people who are healthy or normal, whatever that means, they're much more predictable. If people are predictable, they're more easily manipulated.
And you can introduce them into a consensus. Greg went into a cult for a while and wrote a book about cults, and so he actually so he actually knows what he's talking about, if you didn't notice.
Quickly pick up, there's a very interesting thing someone was saying about how Pharaoh doesn't care about his own people either. I think this is really interesting. And you were saying, Oz, that Moses is both the servant of God and the servant of his people. And so he's kind of, there's a beautiful contrast or inversion. Pharaoh is neither the servant of God nor of his people.
Right.
And so you have it reminds me of this wonderful line, I'm probably going to misquote it, of Augustine, St. Augustine, where he says, love God and do what you want, basically. Like, if you've got the superordinate, everything flows from that. Whereas with Pharaoh, starting with the self, or putting himself at the center of the universe, it's not like just a little bit follows from that, but everything falls apart, because there's nothing.
There's no valid sovereignty at all.
No, none.
And that's the definition of tyranny as well. You could imagine a leader who loves his people but not God, at least in principle you could, but one that loves neither. It's like, well, then what do you love? And if one of the things I've started to puzzle through thinking about psychopathy is the psychopath doesn't treat himself as a community that extends across time. He just treats himself like the thing that's here right now. And that's why he betrays himself. And so to be properly oriented to yourself and to be oriented to the community is the same thing, because you're an iterated game, and you know it, because you have a future. If you're not beholden to that, then, well, what are you beholden to? And then it's something like short-term impulsive hedonic gratification and maybe moody nihilism. It's something like that, because there's no iterative containing structure, even practically speaking. That's the essence of tyranny. And you might think, well, you get to do whatever you want. You're free, right? Because you can see that the flaw in a kind of liberalism here is you're free from the constraints of society. It's like, well, then you're not free. And that's why it's so interesting that God keeps insisting that the Hebrews are free to serve him. Every time this comes up, it's the same statement. It's like, well, is freedom found in the lack of all constraints? That would be Rousseau in some fundamental sense, right? Or even Freud is freedom from the superego, although Freud was wiser than that. But the real freedom is to be found in the proper ordering of things and the proper subservience to things.
Bob Dylan, you got to serve someone.
Right.
Yeah,
and Dylan realized that after the onset of his conversion to Christianity.
Yeah, it was about 76, I think. That was just after his
That's
conversion.
when I think that's what made him convert, is he realized that statement was in some sense fundamentally true. And Moses said, we will go with our young and with our old, with our sons and with our daughters, everyone, with our flocks and with our herds we will go, for we must hold a feast unto the Lord. So they're not just going again into the wilderness to serve God. The proper service has to be a feast. It has to be a celebration.
Yeah. Well, sacrifice is always a feast. We always forget that. Even when you offer the sacrifice, you eat the meat. So communion and sacrifice are related together. So you get the body. It's like you offer it up, and then you offer up the smoke. You offer up the spirit with the smoke, and then you eat the body. So you join together in eating the same food. Right. It's a really primordial symbolism that you're eating the food.
Right. And it's so interesting that it's consecrated to God first, because it also means, and this is really the case too, that communal sharing of food, which is done, properly speaking, in the spirit of hospitality and brotherhood, is done in the really fundamental sense in the service of God.
That's right.
And this is something primordial beyond belief, because human beings share food.
That's right.
And that's really weird.
But think about it, we share body. That's the way to understand it. The idea of becoming one body, the idea of a nation as a body or a family as a body.
Well, when you share food, you are acting like one body.
That's distributing, you were saying yesterday, right? You're distributing excess resources through the population for the greater strength of the community.
But it can only happen if you are able to also create common attention. We have to recognize each other as one before I share food with you.
Yes.
That is the manner in which we recognize ourselves as one. And then there's like the ultimate version of that, or the ultimate extension of that, which is the idea of even sharing food with the stranger. That becomes like, oh my goodness, it's almost like you're acting like God and you're bringing the stranger into communion with you. These are really, really primordial things.
Well, because you're making the stranger, in some sense, if you're bringing them into the collective body that is being nourished, and that is, as you said, it's extraordinarily primordial act.
Yeah. And then you have the surprise of discovering who the stranger is hiding, in the story of Abraham.
Well, that's breaking bread. Right. I mean, that's why it's so symbolic. And I was thinking also, part of it is, I was thinking our feast that we had last night, but a lot of it is when you're eating with people, there's exchange, you're thinking about that, the fear of contamination, right? The conservatism gone awry, right, is solidified with you're building an impenetrable wall and new ideas and resources don't get in. But the more you're exposed to that, literally on the level of germs, the more you're inoculated to change, and you can't do it too quickly or it overwhelms you.
When we've spent time in Washington, one of the things we've noticed, and this is really unbelievably interesting, is that as people have sat down less and less to eat with each other, right? To engage in hospitality with one another outside the narrow confines of the political dispute, they're much less able to see the commonality they have, let's say, as Americans, as opposed to being Republicans or Democrats, and the more likely they are to demonize. And that collapse of hospitality, that can be absolutely fatal to a society. And, when we've gone to Cambridge and Oxford, one of the things that are so cool about those universities is, with their colleges, is that the students all sit down to eat together, and they tend to do that and at Hillsdale, Larry Arnn, he sits and eats with the undergraduates all the time. And so he's constantly informed by them because he's part of the he allows himself to be part of the undergraduate body.
And it's two forces in politics. So one is gerrymandering, where you're representing an amoeba splotch of a district where everybody's like-minded and everybody else has been carefully excised, which means you're speaking to an increasingly condensed version of some ideology, right? It's a way of ossifying it, but also, you know, in the 80s, people started to spend much more time in district rather than in DC. And some of that is fundraising. Some of that's for other political reasons we don't need to get into.
Some of that's hard, the difficulty of moving families.
Right,
now.
but so what that means now is that you're no longer engaged in DC, in restaurants, in church groups, in Little League teams, where you're seeing each other in three-dimensionality. You're only there for one purpose, and then that purpose becomes two-dimensional and combative. So that essential notion of sharing.
Well, and that's the danger of a technology like Zoom, too. I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about in relation to the Russia-Ukraine war is that, well, how often did people sit down with Putin in the last 3 years? Like almost never? Well, if he has a tilt towards paranoia, and he is a Russian, so he might, then that's not such a good idea. And you don't know. And I would say that's one thing perhaps that Trump was good at, to sit down with people like Kim Jong-un and perhaps with Putin, and to at least be there in the same room with them in some credible way. We have no idea how much international peace depends on those strange bonds of at least quasi-trust that are forged not as a consequence of the shared propositional beliefs, but just as a consequence of that recognition of common humanity. It isn't obvious at all to what degree you can get that in the deepest sense through
when you eat
mere
with
abstract
someone,
communication.
Eating with someone is probably one of the most primordial things that you can do. It is so profound that it's like it's beyond rational discussion. It precedes any political discussion you could have, which is why it's so traditional for heads of state to eat together, to have.
You can at least see that they don't steal your food. Well, there were times, or kill you for it. There were times where that was like, especially if you're eating with a stranger, that was a crucial issue, especially if you were both actually hungry. So it was a real test of, well, it really is a real test of civilization to see if people can sit down and share a meal.
When I speak to singles on my radio show, I'm just realizing it now because of this discussion. So it goes from, if they meet through an internet site, which by the way, I recommend to singles all the time, and they meet through an internet site. So then they will email, then they will talk, then they might video. Then they rarely go for a meal. They'll meet at Starbucks.
Right.
When it graduates to a meal, everybody knows this is a bit more serious.
This is the beginning of something intimate.
A meal. So it's a very interesting thing about the meal.
Yeah. Well, it's a very embodied act, unlike the rest of those acts that can be mediated electronically.
Well, Starbucks is embodied too, but it's not a meal.
Right.
It's a coffee.
Right. You don't use your teeth on coffee.
There's an interesting side to this too. It's one of the saddest statistics I heard recently was about the number of children who grow up in homes that never eat together, or less than once a week. So we've had this kind of total devastation of domestic, little just in the house of people eating together. So there's I think you can understand some of the civic fragmentation we have at the level that many people growing up without any kind of human frame to their shared experience at all, no rituals. But it's very interesting. So there's in a certain sense in which eating with another person is, in a sense, inherently an other-focused ritual, but this is also explicitly so, right? Because it's we must hold a feast unto the Lord, and so it seems to me this is why things like the ritual side. We talked about college dinners, but also at home dinners. Why grace before meals is so important. It's an orientation of the whole activity towards that superordinate principle, which I would argue you can do damn well, even if maybe especially if you're an atheist. Perhaps you write your own prayer that is
express gratitude.
Well, and it does bring everybody's focal attention to what's trying to be.
What's
that?
They won't do it. It's like when I advocate the Sabbath, so atheists call my show, we could have a night a week with our family every week. I said, of course you can, but you won't.
Right.
I do it because I actually believe God said honor the Sabbath each week. That's the that's the ultimate reason I take a break from everything 1 day a week.
Yeah, well, you have a moral... Well, the thing is, one of the reasons not to take a break is because you have moral obligations. It's like, well, I have work to do 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It's like, well, you need a moral obligation that's even more serious to get a serious person to take a break.
But by the way, this food thing just occurred to me because I had thought about this, but I forgot about it until now. So in the Holy of Holies is the Ark with the 10 Commandments and one other thing, a table. And in Jewish life, the table is the center of religious life. It is the table at home is more important than the synagogue. Ask any religious Jew. There's no debate about what I'm saying. The center of Jewish religious life is the house, and the center of religious life in the house is the table. And I can say that the Friday night Shabbat dinner and Saturday Shabbat lunch in my upbringing were more formative than any other single event. It is where I learned to think, learned to speak. There was no tolerance for a stupid comment from me. And I learned, because my brother's 6 years older, so he dominated conversation with my father at the Shabbat table. And then when I finally spoke up, I remember the very first time I spoke up, my father said, "That's bullshit." And it was the greatest thing he could have said to me. There was no, "Oh, that's really sweet, Dennis. What a thought." I got none of that. And to this day, I have always asked when I speak, what would my father say?
That is what you should ask when you speak.
That's right.
That's a prayer, man.
You know, when I first came here, 68, picking up what Stephen says, that was shocked me more. There was no family dining table. And in 6 weeks from East Coast to West, there was no family. You know, the family dining table was like a Grand Prix pit stop. And the mother racing off to a soccer match or a violin lesson. And I learned everything from my family heritage at the dinner table.
Well,
so what you're saying, I think,
the central
incredibly important
ritual in Christian religious practice is also a ceremonial feast, right? I mean, it's the delivery of the host is precisely that.
Yeah, I mean, it's primordial, but it's also a revolution in the history of religion, because sacrifice, the idea that feasting becomes sanctified. You've got sacrifice early on. You've got human sacrifice early on. You're not going to sort of eat to sacrificial human victims. Sometimes they did. So there's a sort of there are cannibalistic moments, the threads there. But you do have this shift towards the kind of the vertical sanctifies the horizontal, as it were, the family and the community. And
it's a sanctification of the body too, because there's nothing, in some sense, there's almost nothing more bodily than eating.
Yeah.
You want to bring that up to the highest place. Yeah. All right, so now we know why you have a feast unto the Lord. And he said unto them, "Let the Lord be so with you, as I will let you go and your little ones. Look to it, for evil is before you. Not so. Go now, ye that are men, and serve the Lord, for ye that did desire." And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. And the Lord said unto Moses, "Stretch out thine hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come up upon the land of Egypt, and eat every herb of the land, even all that the hail hath left." So I'm confused about this. I must have missed something here, because doesn't the Pharaoh say here that he will let them go? And he said unto them, "Let the Lord be so with you, as I will let you go, and your little ones. Look to it, for evil is before you."
Well, he would allow the men to go.
Okay, so that's what it is. He'll just allow the men to go. Got it.
That's going to fly.
Okay.
And his servants have just told him, tell him that they can let the men go.
Okay.
And then he says to Moses and Aaron, who do you need to take? And they says, and there's one beautiful phrase too.
Right.
We will go with our young and with our old, with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds.
Right. We're all in on this.
We're all every member of this.
And
community.
Pharaoh says, "You can just take the men."
Yeah.
And then they refuse that.
And
Just
the
men
Lord's
are not
like,
enough.
too little, too late, pal. Right? It's not. He's trying to negotiate.
But it's interesting, like why. I mean, it's worth asking. Why would it be incomplete? I mean, clearly, from the standpoint of Moses and Aaron and what God has asked, it must be everyone. But I think it's worth saying, relative to, let's say, what might be some simplistic critiques of this text. Not only that, so far all the heroes have been women, but that, there's absolute
Everything
demand.
has to, well, even the animals have to be brought into this ritual and ceremonial relationship with God.
Yeah,
and so
you'll see it right all the way till we get to the mountain. The animals are always named as part of what's going on. At least, like they can't touch the mountain. There are different things but they're part of the story. The animals as well.
They're also in the Ten Commandments, which people almost never note. In the Sabbath commandment, your animal has to rest too.
Not so. Go now, ye that are men. Oh, I see. Okay, yes. And serve the Lord, for that ye did desire. And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come up upon the land of Egypt and eat every herb of the land, even all that the hail hath left. And Moses stretched forth his rod over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. And when it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. And the locusts went up over all the land of Egypt and rested in all the coasts of Egypt. Very grievous were they. Before them there were no such locusts as they, neither after them shall be such. For they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened, and they did eat every herb of the land and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left. And there remained not any green thing in the trees or in the herbs of the field through all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste, and he said, I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now therefore forgive, I pray thee, my sin, my failure to hit the target, my sin only this once, and entreat the Lord your God that he may take away from me this death only. And Moses went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. And the Lord turned a mighty strong west wind, which took away the locust and cast them into the Red Sea. Do you know why the east winds?
Yes. But this is really, what's really important to understand is, again, first of all, this is an undoing of creation, right? But the way that the creation is being undone is the way that God is going to lead Israel out of Egypt. So I told you had the fire and the water mixed together. So I'm projecting into the future now, but the Israelites leave, they're guided by a pillar of fire and water. Then they get to the Red Sea, and how do they cross? And a wind comes and rushes the water aside, and there's a new creation which appears, this dry land which appears amongst the separated waters. But this is really a repetition. It's the spirit of God over the waters.
Right,
this is a recreation of the world.
And that's the spirit, because spirit is wind, that's inspiration, that's air.
Yeah, so now you have like a kind of undoing, like a strange, perverse version of that, where it's like God is removing himself and it's going backwards, right? So the two columns become mixed, everything is falling apart, and then the wind comes and brings heaven as a predator. So it could have been birds that were predators, but now it's like these locusts that come down and are undoing the world as they come down.
Why do they come from the east, do you suppose? There's got to be a reason for that.
I mean, we would need to look again. Is it the opposite? Because when the wind blows through the sea, they also says from east to west or from west to east. Okay. It's either the same or the opposite. I don't know. We'd have to see, but I think it's trying, because it says it's blowing the locusts into the Red Sea, and so it's even showing us like this is what's going to happen later. It's like a little.
There's further evidence, by the way, for it being the recreation. Passover is 7 days.
Yes. Right.
It's another creation.
Right, yeah. Well, the motif of recreation and disintegration into chaos, that's an unbelievably pervasive motif.
Yeah, and it becomes clearer and clearer, because the next thing that's coming right is darkness. Yeah. So it's like that's it. It's like when God in the beginning, when God creates light, that's the first thing He creates. And so we're back to darkness. We're moving all the way back to.
And it's funny too, because we do believe too, and think this way, that when things fall apart completely, that's the darkest point, right? So we equate darkness, utter darkness, with a complete decimation, right? And it's the opposite of enlightenment and vision, right? And with death, yeah.
I think there's also a very deep spiritual truth here. I mean, the Pharaoh, he says, no, take the men only. This sense that, when you give of yourself, you give what is yours, you give what you have received. you give what is under you away, it doubles it. You're participating in a kind of profound reciprocity with the way things are. And when you hold them to yourself, you say, no, I'm keeping this all to myself. You can't even have what you have. It itself disappears. The locust eat it, right? You get nothing instead of even what you had.
That's why you're supposed to store up treasures in heaven and not in your possessions in the most fundamental sense.
And there's no storing up without, you must give your sacrifice, you must give it away. Well, you must self other.
Well, that is what happens, is that if our hypothesis about storing food in the bodies of others in some sense is correct, the most stable treasure house is the consequence of generosity, period. And you certainly see that when there was so much illness in my family, many people came to help us. And it was unbelievably beneficial. And we were in a situation where nothing but help helped. Like, money didn't help. It did in some sense, like it always does, but that wasn't the most fundamental help. And so, all right. So, and he went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. And the Lord turned a mighty strong west wind, which took away the locusts and cast them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the coasts of Egypt. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, so that he would not let the children of Israel go. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt.
This is a plague against the chief god of Egypt, the sun god.
Right. Even darkness which may be felt. And Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. And Pharaoh called unto Moses and said, go ye, serve the Lord. Only let your flocks and your herds be stayed. But let your little ones also go with you. And Moses said, thou must give us also sacrifices and burnt offerings, that we may sacrifice unto the Lord our God. Our cattle also shall go with us. There shall not a hoof be left behind.
I love that.
Right. Exactly. It's like the nail that loses the war, right? No detail is too small to be included in this totality of service. For thereof must we take to serve the Lord our God. Everything we must take. And we know not with what we must serve the Lord until we come thither. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. And Pharaoh said unto him, get thee from me, take heed to thyself, see my face no more. For in that day thou seest my face, thou shalt die. So, and Moses said, thou hast spoken well. I will see thy face again no more.
But if you just stop there, 9 extraordinary plagues and still inconclusive.
Right.
Till the Lord steps in on the 10th.
Right.
What's going on with the darkness?
I mean, it really is the end of it's as if the world is being completely undone. And now
there's not even the separation. Right. There's not even the emergence of light then. It's right to the ultimate beginning.
And there's a very mysterious aspect to the last plague. It's a very, very mysterious.
The last plague kills the future.
Kills the firstborn.
But the future.
Right.
There's something more going on there.
It kills the adventurous masculine spirit as well. So that's you could say in some sense that's the
barren, right? But then the next one is it's killing that to which
even
is
potential.
Yeah.
Right. So because you reduce things to darkness that exists at the beginning of time. In principle, their potential still exists because the potential existed in the chaotic darkness, and you're saying no. Now the potential itself becomes the next thing. Jesus, so actuality and potentiality are both destroyed by tyranny. Yeah,
and it reminds me a bit of like why Dante's hell is frozen, right? There's no movement because the good of intellect, all illumination that would illuminate your will so you could seek a good is gone. So you're in a state of complete darkness. You think about awake in the middle of the night. I mean, you can't walk, you can't move, you can't engage in any meaningful way with the world or with any other human being. It's a kind of complete shutdown of all
It's also
human action
equivalent to
itself.
blindness.
Yes.
Right.
And it's the first time we've got a plague which is completely transcendent. I mean, miraculous in the sense that there is no alternative naturalistic explanation. I mean, with the locusts bring darkness. So the land is darkened by the locusts. But this time, there's nothing at all to explain it. It's simply God acting
Right,
as a
so
sort
it's
of, in a
something even
transcendent
beyond
act.
the natural order that's rebelling now. It's the structure of
Naturalistically
existence
inexplicable.
itself.
Exactly.
Do any of you have an explanation? I don't. And I've known this phrase my whole life. 1021, a darkness that can be touched.
I think it's so thick. It's palpable.
So
you know, when you say that, the darkness
is it
was
metaphorical
palpable.
or is it actually literal? I assume it's metaphorical, which is fine. I don't have an axe to grind here. I find the phrase, it does. That's exactly what this phrase says. You could touch it, yes.
Yeah, well, we do see echoes of that in that phrase. The darkness was palpable. It's so intense that it transcends the sense of mere vision. So it seems to me to be at least that, if it's not more. All right, Exodus 11. And the Lord said unto Moses, yet will I bring one plague more. You get these 3 sets of 3, and then the outsider. Yeah, I will bring one plague more upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterward, he will let you go hence. And when he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out hence altogether. And so that means with everything, right? Well, and oddly enough, with even more than the Hebrews were asking for, because they're just asking to begin with when they want to go away to take everything they own. But the Pharaoh pushes it so far that they not only take everything they own, they take the treasure of the Egyptians. Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold. That's the same motif as the death of the firstborn, right? Because they've stored up treasure, and treasure, by definition, is stored potential that can be used in the future. And so they're taking the future here in that sense as well. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. So that does imply that now the Egyptians are turning to be on the side of the Hebrews, right? It says that very directly. And the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants and in the sight of the people. And Moses said,
So we have a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, but loved Joseph. And now what do we have? Another Jew who the Egyptians adore. It's just ironic.
Right.
Joseph and now Moses.
That language is used of Joseph as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Let's see. With regard to the people, no, I don't think so. But they knew he saved their lives. So,
but in this case, I don't know if they adored him. At least it says that he was great.
You mean Joseph?
No, Moses. They say he was great in their sight.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, that's fair enough.
They might have been scared of him more than anything else.
Both of them were great in their sight.
Yeah, they were great in their sight.
Whether they adored them or not, yeah.
Question.
For sure, Joseph they loved. That's for sure.
Where are you emotionally? I'm just curious about this. When you're reading this, are you reading this in eager anticipation of the Pharaoh being punished? Are you reading this in trepidation? And because I remember when
It's me, it's more trepidation. It's like, I think because I probably identify with the Pharaoh.
You do?
Well, enough.
You mean about losing a child?
Yeah, about
just
what's
about
coming.
the consequences of your own stupidity. It's like
are you feeling
vindicated?
Like vengeful that you're hoping that the Pharaoh's going to get his? Are you feeling remorse and empathy for what's coming? What is your emotional? Because I remember I used to read in like high school history when you'd read like World War I and World War II. It's like you have that sense of being ensconced. Like I really hope that America wins, right? Like you have this emotional positioning in relation to reading history, even if you know the outcome. And I'm just curious.
But in this, like there's this growing, looming threat. It's as if God is saying, "This is don't if you don't listen, this is where we're going." He's not telling you where we're going yet. It's almost like it's like in a movie, right? You can feel the music like coming up, and you can feel the threat, and you know, like, please let it stop before it reaches that point. You don't even know where it's going, and then once it gets there, I don't think is it possible to not feel sad for the Egyptians and to not feel sympathy and to not wish that the Pharaoh had broken before? And it's like you get there and you're like, oh.
Dennis, how about you?
I hope Pharaoh gets his.
Yeah.
I admit.
I knew I could count on
What
you in
about
that
the
regard.
Egyptians?
I was like, that's why I was just waiting. I was
Is that a good sign or a bad sign?
Well,
we
he's
know
clearly
Dennis
the
likes
villain.
revenge.
He's clearly the villain. And
Yes,
there is that
exactly.
hope.
I want villains to get punished. I don't know.
But do you want the villains to learn before they have to pay the ultimate price?
That's such a Christian question.
I know. That's why I
That is
wanted to
precious
get
beyond
Prager's
words.
take on this.
I don't give a damn if they learn before they die. I want them to die. Because I'm more concerned with good people. I don't want good people to suffer. So whether Pharaoh learns or not is between Pharaoh and Pharaoh. But between Pharaoh and me, he has to be punished. But the great lesson, which is, of course, unlearned, like most great lessons, is people do really like tyrants. There's no way around it. One of you mentioned this, and I didn't bother commenting on it. But polls in Russia prior to Ukraine showed the increasing proportions of the Russian people adore Stalin.
Yeah. Well, that's the same thing that happens to the Israelites. They complain to Moses about...
Because they want a monarch?
No, they want to go back to Egypt.
Oh,
They're in
want
the
to go back?
desert.
Okay, there you
Dennis,
go.
do
That's
they
right.
adore Stalin or they adored order and the greatness of Russia? I know Russians now
Also, one might
Who what?
who admire
The order under.
in
Well, there was
America.
order. There's always order under a tyrant.
That's what I mean.
Yes, okay.
You love order rather than
well,
disorder.
freedom is messy.
In this
And the
text,
tyrant
don't
gives
like
it to
messy.
you, but they still are happy when the tyrant
There's
falls.
also some question about the veracity of polling under Stalin.
No, there's polling
now.
now. Not poll. Of course, polling under Stalin means nothing. Polling today, I mean,
I know.
Yeah, there's
in the last
definitely-
few years.
There's definitely, what do you
Yes.
call that? Nostalgia for... But some of that's ignorance, too. You know, they look back and they just see the greatness, so to speak.
Right, but it's willful ignorance.
Yeah, I know.
But don't you think in this text,
Same with
it is clear, it seems like in this text, it's clear that there is this, it's trying to show us that the people of Egypt now the Israelites find favor in their sight. They're giving them jewels and things for them to leave, and they see Moses as being very powerful in their sight. And then in the text itself, it switches right away to saying, now all the firstborn will die. And it says of the Pharaoh, and then it says to the woman behind the mill. And so it's like right in the text, a few verses from each other, you see the people have compassion for the Israelites, and then it says, no, but their children are going to die too.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like there is
very
a sense
sad.
in which we're meant
That's
to
right.
have compassion,
That's correct.
even for the Egyptians in the
But
narrative.
Dennis, take Weimar and how many Germans were grateful for the order that Hitler seemed to bring, and then they suddenly realized.
Well,
they loved order rather than the Weimar
I
chaos.
tend not to defend the Germans, but it is fair to say that Hitler didn't get a majority of the vote. The Nazis didn't get a majority vote. But between the communists and the Nazis, they did get a majority. The tyranny parties did win out.
No, but I'm with you on the comeuppance. My goodness.
Yeah, thank you. I know I had a feeling.
I pray
Yes.
daily that Putin will get his comeuppance. I really do pray.
Your
Yeah.
point of willful blindness, I mean, that holds both ways. Like you have polling now about communism, right? You have polling. I think this has to do with like a generational remove from the horrors of both Stalin and what happened in communism, right? So
Right.
it is both directions.
You mean both willful and just normal? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
I mean that it's not just that people look back fondly on tyrants. People look back fondly on communism now. They were removed from a certain distance of it. So the willful blindness and the ignorance isn't.
Listen, the number of Americans and English who gave Stalin the bomb, the flirtation with tyranny on the part of Western intellectuals is among the most depressing facts of the 20th century.
The Eastern
No,
Europeans
not
who've
quite yet.
experienced communism, they don't look back.
That's right. But I mean, like when we're polling today,
Oh, you
right?
mean
If you
Western?
poll, in the West, if you poll
Well,
now on
but
communism,
they're
people have an
ignorant.
idea, right? And likewise with tyranny. Like if Stalin's doing well, in
What
the polls,
percentage of Harvard seniors do you think could identify Pol Pot?
Like
I would say 5%.
Yeah, I think you're probably being optimistic on that front.
Okay.
I mean, when I taught about the Gulag catastrophes or the catastrophes of the Soviet
Gulag
Union,
too. Just say
hardly
Gulag.
any of my students
That's
have ever
right.
heard of any of that.
Hardly any of them today have heard of Solzhenitsyn.
Oh, sure. Oh, that's a given. But Pol Pot, one of the great mass murderers, he killed a quarter of his own people. By the way, these tyrants killed. Hitler is the only of the tyrants that didn't mostly slaughter his own people. Yeah. Pol Pot killed Cambodians. Mao killed Chinese. Stalin killed Russians. And they're still held in esteem.
How about Mussolini?
Well, he wasn't a mass murderer. He's not in their category. He was a tyrant, but he's not in their category. Italians don't make that type.
The Italians make lousy tyrants.
Yeah.
All right, so back to 11:1 here. And the Lord said unto Moses, Yet I will bring one plague more upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out hence altogether. Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. And Moses said, Thus saith the Lord, about midnight will I go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts. So the tyranny has got so cataclysmic that it destroys the potential of everything. That's really what's happening here. It's not just
critically important is that God does the killing, not the Israelites. I will go forth. It's a very important point of the text.
And I think we have, like when you use the word, I think it's best not to use the word potential here. When the Egyptians give their riches to the Israelites, that's the potential that they're giving. What God is doing is he's removing the seed. That's what he's doing. That's what the firstborn is, right? He's removing the identity of the Egyptians. That's what the firstborn represents.
Well, there's this strange insistence in the text too on moving forward that there's something marked and set aside about the firstborn.
And we're gonna see that there's something else going on here that is far more cosmic and deeper than what you can imagine, which is that we're talking about the recreation of the world. And we'll see that the death of the firstborn and the sacrifice of the firstborn is not only about Egypt, it's also about Israel. And Israel is called to sacrifice their firstborns, and then God gives them a way out.
Israel is God's firstborn.
Yeah,
that's what it says here.
Yeah, and so I think we're talking about something so deep that in Christianity we talk about the Lamb of God that was sacrificed before the foundation of the world. We're talking about something so cosmically profound that is very difficult to talk about the manner in which reality exists through sacrifice itself. And this is deeper than eating food together, right? The idea of human sacrifice, like we think somehow that in Genesis, it's this weird exception. Kierkegaard gets it wrong to the core. This idea that it's this weird exception that God asks Abraham to kill his firstborn. It's like, no. There's a sense, even in Scripture, that we should offer our firstborn. That there's something very, very deep about that, and that God is giving.
To offer yourself in service to God is to offer yourself. It's to offer yourself in sacrifice to God.
Well, that's what ultimately we come to. Like, let's say the final Christian answer will be that no, that's you offer yourself.
Right.
That's the final solution to the problem of killing the firstborn is saying no, you have to offer yourself. But all through, it's like there's a sense in which the first fruits, the firstborn, are normally offered to God because that's how the world works. For something to exist, the highest aspect of it has to be given up to the level above it, right? It's like that for anything. It's like if you want a basketball team to exist, it has to give up its first fruits to basketball, or else it cannot exist. You have to give up the best of you up. And so that became ritualized in all cultures as as human sacrifice, as sacrifice of the best beasts, of the first fruits. All of this type of imagery is all very coherent, and it's there. Right when we get to the end of the description of the death of the Egyptians, it's right away going into when we talk about the Passover. It's going to say all the firstborn that should be offered to God. Now you will kill an animal in their place. But that
the first in a series, in some sense, it marks the beginning, and
that's right.
It establishes the identity
of something, yeah.
It establishes the identity of something. Yeah,
that's right.
And it's
whatever
like
it is, the first.
First and foremost are the same thing.
So foundations.
A living sacrifice.
Yeah.
Not a dead one.
No. But this idea of a foundation, think about the foundation of a city or the foundation of America. It's like things live in their foundation as a kind of point of radiance that then will play itself out. And so the sins...
So that needs to be sanctified to God.
As much as possible, because what will happen is that the sins of the origin of anything will also play themselves out. Right? So when
that's what Solzhenitsyn documented, I would say, so effectively in the Gulag Archipelago, because one of the signal contributions he made, as well as documenting the atrocities, was to say this was not an exception to the moral rule of communism. This was the fruit of that seed. Yeah. And here's how it played itself out, unfolded logically and inevitably, right? And that made it very difficult afterwards for people who were knowledgeable to say, well, like is always said, that wasn't real communism. It's no, that was exactly real communism. That's why that horror bloomed every place that seed was planted.
And that's why in almost all the origin stories that you'll find, there's always a sin in the origin, because they have to account for why things are messed up. Right. It's like, so Rome is founded on fratricide. And so there's in that foundation, there's already a seed which will play itself out in the Roman story.
I'm not sure that, let me throw out an idea for consideration that I'm not sure that I want to stand behind, but it's this. So the oldest often represents tradition, right? I mean, Adlerian birth order, right? The oldest child is generally the one that embodies that tradition. And in some ways, if you sacrifice the firstborn, you're sacrificing the human, including the flawed nature of what your traditions are. And sacrifice in some ways is giving up the thing that you believe that you can least possibly give up, right? It's like, it's a call to flexibility in some regards. Like if you're in a drought.
But it's not just sacrifice, it's sacrifice to God. It's sacrifice up. You're giving up. Right? This is a movement of giving up.
It's a strange phrase too, that we say that, to give up.
Yeah. You're giving it up to purpose.
And you say you
sacrifice it to purpose.
You also say you give up when you admit that you've been defeated. I give up. Well, why up exactly?
Well, isn't it giving up because one of the things with sacrifice, you think, well, if there's a drought and you're killing your fattest calf to get out of the drought, isn't that an indication that when you're in any drought, proverbial or otherwise, like if you're an alcoholic, you have to give up the thing that you think is the greatest value. You sacrifice the thing that you think that you least can afford up, because that's responsible for your drought.
It's also because if you're in real trouble, the thing you love most is what's got you in trouble.
Right.
But it's ultimately linked to attention. And so you'll see how it leads. This is not like magical woo-woo stuff. It's very important to be careful not to fall into that. It's like, if you take the most precious thing, and we all agree we're going to give that up, we've now recognized what the most precious thing is, first of all, together. And then we've all participated in giving that towards our purpose. So what have we done? We've given our attention also to that purpose, to the thing that binds us together. And so later, like now, for example, we'll say things like a sacrifice of worship, right? Now we say we offer a sacrifice of worship because we are gathered together. We are offering up our attention up to God. We are giving, our attention, our intentions. All of this is being offered up, and it's a way in which we recognize
how does all
what is
of
the
that
highest.
apply to the killing of the firstborn?
Because I think one of the things that's going on now is the world is restarting. It's the beginning of the world.
Right, but this is not a sacrifice to God, the firstborn. All the other sacrifices were.
It's God taking the seed. Let's say it that way. God is.
Well, this is surely partly judgment for the Egyptian.
You could say it's on the crux of the end and the beginning. It's like the end will be this, and then the beginning will be the sacrifice that the Israelites offer up.
Isn't it the final decimation of one tradition to make way for another? Like all the gods have been, all the Egyptian gods have been vanquished, and now the firstborn, that's an encapsulation of the tradition of Egypt, is being killed,
taken up,
right, while the Israelites are being spared. So it's the ultimate decimation of the tradition of the Egyptians after the gods have been vanquished.
I mean, we'll get into this, when we talk about it, but in a certain sense, it's also a liturgy of mercy. So it's this recalibration in the way you're saying from actually death to life, because what will actually turn out is that the Israelites are not required to kill their firstborn children. That's not what happens. They can be redeemed. And so it's a consecration, you might say it's a consecration to life that is possible under the orientation under the orientation that is possible under God's mercy.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of the first great chunk of the book of Exodus, the end of chapter 11, and from 12 onwards, we don't see any trace of Egypt at all. Egypt has vanished completely.
Well, that echoes that notion. When
a little after they get flooded in the waters, let's say, that's when they vanished.
Well, and Moses says to the Pharaoh at the end of the 9th plague, "Thou hast spoken well. I will see thy face again no more." So this is the end of Egypt. You're saying also in the story.
Well, obviously they get when the waters close in upon them, but then after that we're moving to the new, to the incorporation of Israel as a nation. The disintegration of Egypt precedes it.
Okay.
Just for the record, I just want to be on record as saying I just see it as punishment. I don't see a cosmic significance to the killing of the firstborn. That's the most treasured.
Why do you think God asked for the firstborn to be redeemed?
That is entirely accurate. But so you're relating that to this, but you may be right, because he does ask the firstborn, but of course they're redeemed. So I asked it earlier, and only because I want to learn, because I think there might be something there. I understand it, I've always understood it until 5 minutes ago, as the most precious thing in most people's lives is their firstborn. Yeah. And God is taking away the most precious thing as a punishment for all these horrors against the Hebrews over the years. Why is that not sufficient an explanation for what God did?
To me, it's not sufficient, because very soon God will ask for the firstborn of the Israelites and ask them.
Because he took the firstborn of the Egyptians is part of the reason. So, but I see. So, okay, so even elucidate on that. So I'm taking the firstborn of Egyptians other than as the punishment of the most precious thing they have, because.
So think of it this way. Think of it this way. So it's like it's the end of a world. This is the end of Egypt. It's not really like it, but in the story, it's the end of Egypt. God is removing the seed from Egypt. All the seeds, all the firstborns, all the most precious, everything that represents tradition, that represents that which holds it together, is removing it from Egypt. And then he turns to Israel and he says, for you to exist, you have to offer the same to me, and it'll be redeemed. But when you offer it, it's not the same, right? When you offer,
well, if you don't offer the firstborn,
then it gets taken.
That's right. That's what's happening.
I think that's what's going on.
Yes.
What was the word? I'm sorry.
That if you don't offer your precious gifts, it will be taken.
Right.
Because that's how reality works.
If you don't make the highest sacrifice, you're going to end up in the situation
I'm glad I pulled.
Does that make sense? A little more sense to you?
That's your tying it to the sacrifice of Isaac.
Yeah.
But that, in a way, I mean, there's no distinction between the cosmic order and the punishment, right? I mean, this is the logic of sin. It gets to the point where you lose your very self.
Well, and they're also being called on here to offer up everything. Well, we see that motif being repeated.
Yeah, not a hoof left behind.
That's right. And and you better offer up what's most valuable to God, or what's most valuable will be taken away from you.
And it's related to the idea that we've talked about several times, which is in a way that we must be willing to die. If you die willfully, then you don't die accidentally. If you give yourself, if you're willing to die, then death won't surprise you.
And if you're willing to give away, then you
in that light, I think the non-Jews here will find this of interest.
Yeah.
Jews have historically regarded staying Jewish, as opposed to assimilating, as very, very possibly, and in some cases likely, meaning the sacrifice of their children. One quick anecdote will explain this beautifully. Many years ago, I gave a speech in Phoenix to the Jewish community, and as I went down to my seat on the plane, a woman of about 35 years of age looked at me and said, "Oh, I just want you to know, I was at your speech last night." It turns out I was sitting next to her. And she said, "Oh, I really enjoyed your speech," and so on. And then she told me her story. She's not Jewish, and she's married to a Jew. I said, "Well, what did your husband think of the speech?" "He didn't go." So I said, "He wouldn't go to the speech? And you, the non-Jewish spouse, went?" "Yes. He wants nothing to do with being a Jew because he is convinced that if he stays Jewish, his children or grandchildren will die because of that decision." That is an omnipresent thought among Jews that is not known to non-Jews. And it makes, so the act of staying Jewish in Jewish history meant very possibly a sacrifice.
And Moses said, "Thus saith the Lord, about midnight will I go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts. And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it anymore." So that's the ultimate in misery and grief, worse than darkness. "But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that ye may know how that the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel."
Okay, so I got my thoughts together on this. So the voluntary offering of sacrifice, right? That's also the fundamental basis of the hero's journey, by which I mean encoded in all the actions that we're discussing. It's the voluntary exposure to terror that actually gives you a chance to triumph over it, right? It's the voluntary nature. And so that's habituation in therapy, right? That's the hero choosing to go forth and to confront death on its own terms. But if you wait and you hole up and you solidify, it's going to come get you.
And if it's forced on you, it won't work.
That's right.
But this is also in another sense forced, right? I mean, you can say voluntary in one sense, right? I mean, as we'll see in the next chapter, okay, you can not put the blood over the door. You're free to do that, but
well, you're free
it's
to,
not voluntary in another sense. I mean, it's the nature of reality is what it is. It's not optional here.
Well, you're free to accept or reject the inevitable,
Yes.
but it's still inevitable.
Yes.
But the very fact that this is the 10th plague, in other words, the highest in the succession, means that Dennis's point is surely primary, and yours may come in as a deep background interpretation, but in the text, this is judgment.
Yeah. It's the end of the world. It's the end of the world is the way to see it.
Right. It's right. Absolutely.
My fellow Jew.
And all these...
You too, but you know what I meant.
And
I take it in good faith.
"And all these thy servants shall come down unto me, and bow down themselves unto me, saying, Get thee out, and all the people that follow thee. And after that I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in a great anger. And the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. And Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh. And the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, so that he would not let the children of Israel go out of his land. So, we're through the plagues. Exodus 12:1. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Well, so that's
right.
that definitely marks
it's the new beginning.
The new
That's
beginning.
Right, that's right.
Right. So it's the apocalypse,
Yep.
and now it's the new beginning.
Yep.
Right. speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of the month, they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbors next to his house take it according to the number of souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb, your sacrificial offering, shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. So you don't get to cheap out on the lamb front is the idea here. Ye shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper doorpost of the houses, wherein they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. There are a lot of rules here about this. So is it partly because it's the establishment of the new order? Is it the necessity of bringing all this into order now that the new, epoch is dawning?
There's definitely, I don't know, Dennis, I would be curious to hear your opinion on this, because the sense that I get is this is already like a mini law that he's giving, right? It's not the fullness of the law, but it's like, here's the new beginning, and this new beginning is going to be reflected again when Moses comes down the mountain, but so it comes with law to a certain extent. I don't know.
And there's a sacrifice here that seems
the first one is circumcision. This is the second one. But isn't the significance, all the pagans celebrated nature. Here you're celebrating history, deliverance this night. And that's what's new, I think.
By the
and
way,
that's why it's the 10th. That's why it's the 10th.
Yeah, this is built into the calendar.
Well, the law precedes Noah. But you're right vis-a-vis the Hebrews, the first law is circumcision, but the world the first is to be fruitful and multiply.
Oh, okay, yeah. Interesting.
Okay, so there is the establishment of a law here now that things.
I think for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things going on.
Okay,
yeah, for sure, ritual. But I'm afraid that there's many aspects of this ritual that I feel they escape me personally, and so I would be happy to hear.
Well, so if anybody, because these details aren't irrelevant, right? I mean, there are reasons that all of these details exist, but I don't know, why with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs.
Leavened is spoiled.
Yeah.
There were two.
Oh, so it's a purity. Is it a purity issue?
Well, not purity in the Torah sense. This purity and impurity has its own terminology, but the leavening process is a putrefaction process.
Right. So there's death in that.
That's it.
No, you're right. That's
separation
totally right.
of life and death is the fundamental ritual idea.
Okay, so that's also why it has to be a perfect lamb and not blemished. This is
right. Well, that makes it a real sacrifice. You can't take your lousiest animal.
Right.
I think I don't know if it's quite right, though. I mean, leaven is life, right? I mean,
no, but he's totally right. Leaven is an addition. Mm-hmm. It's like a little parasite that you add, which makes the bread grow. But I know you're bothered by that, because later in the Christian terms, when they have this discussion about leaven and unleavened, they say it's like in the Orthodox tradition, they take the leavened bread because they say that it's also in some way the growing, the fire of the Spirit, which moves into the foreigner. But this has to do with the foreigner, like not adding leaven to your bread has to do with...
I'm a sourdough bread baker, so I want to say that there's a sense, you keep your starter going, right? And so that's what allows you to rise bread, is that you have this thing from the past, right? That you put the flour and the water in and it grows the thing up. So I think it's more a sign of the new beginning you're talking about, that because you have to keep the thing going, but you can't only do that by having the thing that you had from the past present with you here now. And what they're saying is, no, that is all out. You have to start a new what we call starter in sourdough, but you have to start a new bread-baking power later. But right now, there's nothing from the past, and that's why the bread is unleavened.
That's fine, but that's also, in some sense, that's a new beginning and a purity issue too. You're not going to contaminate the bread with what came from before.
But isn't there a simpler reason?
Yes.
You're
God, not that.
Yeah, you're not taking time.
Yeah.
They're leaving.
Right, that's the reason in the Torah. Right?
yeah.
Yes.
That's what I
leaving.
thought was that they're rushing to.
Correct. That's the Torah reasoning. But leavening there's much more to it. But you're absolutely right. That's the Torah reason. By the way, there's a third thing that it's my hypothesis, and it may be wrong. But when I read, and I don't even know why I read it, and I don't even know if it's accurate, but I know I read it, that the Egyptians are accredited with inventing bread. And so the rejection of bread is the rejection of Egypt. The rejection of Egypt is a constant in Exodus laws.
Okay. So now with bitter herbs, so is that the requirement to consume the bitter along with the pure? Is it something
well, bitter
like that?
herbs are at the Seder to this day.
Why?
They represent the bitterness of slavery.
A reminder.
Okay. So it is the reminiscent of this
Yes.
of what makes life bitter. Okay. So that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire his head with his legs, and with the pertinence thereof. Pertinence. I don't know what that is in that
I think
case.
those must be the offal, the innards, do you think?
The whole thing.
Yeah,
The whole thing. So it's the whole thing.
And we passed over Stephen's earlier great point. It's household by household. And you've kept that alive, haven't you? The heart of Jewish life.
Yeah, it's the household.
It's the household.
Absolutely.
And we've lost that.
But also the joining of the households too, right? If the
If they're
lamb is
poor.
if you're too small for the lamb to eat the whole lamb, then you bring other people in.
So that everything that's sacrificed upward is consumed
Yeah.
by everyone in its entirety. It's something like that. It's a reflection of the necessity of totality, the totality of a sacrifice and of the consumption.
Now, Dennis, didn't you say yesterday that they're sacrificing the Egyptian something?
Yeah, they're God with the lamb.
The lamb is
Yes,
their God?
yes. It was
I didn't
one
know
of
that.
theirs. It was cattle or sheep and a lamb. Yeah, which is a lamb, right? Isn't a lamb part of the sheep family?
And there's a very, sacrifice here. There's a very sad side to this. Lambs are very sweet little animals. They are a 1 year
Innocent,
old year old lamb with no blemish, never done anything wrong.
Right.
It's
definitely the sacrifice of the innocent.
Yes.
Well, that's why Blake
And perfect.
Blake chose that in Songs of Innocence, right? Little lamb who made thee, right? And then it's counterweighted with tiger, tiger burning bright.
Well, carnivorous land animals cannot be eaten under Jewish law. That's the irony. Every kosher land animal is vegetarian. When we come to that
sacrifice.
in
Well, the
Leviticus,
thing is that even the sacrifice of the child. Well, obviously, the sacrifice of the child is the sacrifice of the innocent, perfect, to the suffering and catastrophe of the world. But of course, that is what you do if you have a child. This is why people say, "I wouldn't bring a child into a world such as this." It demands that sacrifice, and I suppose, in some sense, the more valuable and perfect the child, the more catastrophic the sacrifice, the more catastrophic life too. But then much of this calls for the radical acceptance of that. You certainly see that in Christianity with the idea of the sacrifice of the Lamb of God. But obviously that idea stems from this idea and this practice.
Well, and the pain, and there's no repression or looking away. The bitter herbs are the pain, bitterness, and suffering from slavery, and the unleavened bread, is as Oz was remarking, is that it's in a rush to flee. It's in a rush because you're not safe where you are to keep moving. So it's all incorporated in the meal.
Well, and it's certainly the case that the sacrifice of the innocent is necessary in the most fundamental sense to keep life going, because otherwise you wouldn't have children. And we are all wondering about that in the current world, because in most of the civilized nations, so to speak, the birth rate's way below replacement. We're not, and that means in some sense, we're not willing to sacrifice, it really means this, that we're not willing to sacrifice the unblemished innocent for the continuation of life
By
itself.
sacrifice, you mean we're reluctant, not wanting to sacrifice, we're reluctant to put at risk.
We won't bring them into being
Right.
to be killed, because everything that's brought into being is killed.
Do you think there's also a almost like a hedonistic selfishness?
Oh,
also?
there's definitely also
I
that.
thought you might be somewhat familiar with that, Doctor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. And that which remain until the morning, ye shall burn with fire. And thus ye shall eat it, with your loins girded. Now you gird your loins for battle, eh? And girding your loins is, what does that refer to precisely? What do you do when you gird your loins?
Probably to be ready to escape. I think it was
You just tie all the stuff up. Tie it all up. That's what it is.
Right.
The girdle, I mean,
so you're preparing.
You've got your belt cinched.
No, but it's
You're ready to
belt.
leave. Yeah, okay. So you're
They didn't
prepared.
wear underwear in that time. They didn't wear underwear, so if you're going to do something that demands a lot of, you would gird your loins.
Okay.
Yeah, no one needs to go freestyle off into what's coming.
Into the
here.
desert.
No, that's right. It's not a good
Commando.
Not a
Get
good
ready to
look.
roll.
Thus, yeah, exactly. It's right. So, and thus ye shall eat it, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Right. You make the proper sacrifice. You follow the law. You make the proper sacrifice, and now you're, and in a spirit of readiness to go. Right. Okay. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt. So that echoes that plague motif. I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are, because you're willing to sacrifice the innocent voluntarily.
You know, I've heard this Passover since I was a kid in Sunday school, but someone was just pointing out recently, if the Lord didn't come through, they've marked their houses and they're welcoming a reprisal. And
That's right, it was an act of faith.
An act of faith
And it even
risk
says
and
that here.
courage.
Notice it says,
Yeah.
the blood on the houses shall be a sign for you, not a sign
Yeah,
for me.
But it was a risk, wasn't it?
Totally.
Yeah. If God didn't come through, they're in trouble.
So we're in a situation here where, because the Israelites are willing to make the proper sacrifice, and the proper sacrifice of the innocent and the unblemished innocent, that the ultimate vengeance that God takes on the tyrant will not be taken on them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's something about the mark, like this idea of marking in order to set aside, like to put the marks on the door, like it already sets them
So
apart.
there's something communal about that then too, because that's
Think
a
so.
communicative enterprise, right? To mark it like that.
This is an echo too when God comes to kill Moses, right? And his wife circumcises
There's something
his
there,
son,
definitely,
right?
with the
and
blood
then
of the
touches him with the
circumcision.
blood, right? This is the echo of that, and he's spared.
Well, there's also an idea that
Or comes to kill
there's an
Moses'
idea
son.
too
You said
that
the
part of the
pronoun's
reason
ambiguous.
that Cain's sacrifice is rejected by God is because it contains no blood. It's not a real sacrifice because he's a farmer, right? And so he sacrifices plants. And this is not specifically a canonical interpretation, but it's part of the overlay of interpretation, in that if a sacrifice doesn't have blood, if it's not a bloody sacrifice, which means in some real sense that it partakes of the essence of life, or it has to be the real thing, that it's not going to find favor in the face of God.
It's got to be painful.
Yeah, we have to be giving up something vital and alive and
Something we believe we can least afford to give up.
well, and even in some sense, something that, like, in some sense, deserves the least to be given up. Well, that's certainly a Christian motif, because Christ is the most innocent possible person and it's sacrificed. So you even have to give up, what that means in some sense is you even have to give up the most innocent and least deserving part of yourself. You have to be willing to sacrifice that. And, well, that's obviously the case, so. Okay.
Well, okay, so, going back to Blake now, song, right, and also the transcendental poets, life is but a birth and a forgetting, right? The return to the innocent, right? You give up your innocence, but not to plunge into the world of experience. You have to weather through the world of experience to return to the innocent again, right? So it's about if the pattern is, the transcendental poets, which are obviously laid heavily on top of biblical text and narrative. I mean, the point is you at some point you give up that which is the most innocent to enter into the horrors of experience.
To get back to the state of innocence.
Right, to then have your sword and keep it sheathed is the same as, if you're new and innocent, you have your sheathed sword and you come of open hand, but if you don't know how to use it, right, you can't do anything. And so it's sort of like we were talking about.
Okay, so part of that, it's part of the cosmic deal in some sense, is that if you give up that innocence and what's most worthy, then you pass through the veil of tears in some sense, but you can, and as a consequence of that, that's all restored to you. And that's the same motif as Exodus itself.
Yes, you can reclaim it and watch what happens if you try to not give up your innocence, right? There's no way to do that's
right.
Hansel
Well, then you're naive and you're dependent.
Right.
You stay an infant.
It's Hansel and Gretel, right? You're in the forest. There's this amazing house. You're welcomed in. You eat all the candy in the world and you ultimately get devoured.
Right. Or it's Peter Pan who won't sacrifice the innocence of childhood. He wants to remain king of the Lost Boys, partly even because he doesn't want to become a tyrant, because that's Captain Hook. So he doesn't want to become the Pharaoh. He stays innocent, and there's even a magic in that, but it's counterproductive.
He's out of time, right? It's because Hook is chased by the crocodile with the clock in its stomach.
Yeah,
right?
well, that's why Hook is a tyrant, right? Because he's terrified, in some fundamental sense, he's terrified of the time that's already taken a piece of him. And that's partly what makes him bitter and resentful. And then Pan looks at that and thinks, oh, well, I'm not going to be him. And that's the only thing he can think of being. And certainly in the play, Barry is very careful to point out that Pan he's not a hero for maintaining that. He's a coward.
That's right.
He's more afraid to live than he is to die, Pan. So
yeah, he won't claim, like, for me, the most moving part and piece or line in all of Shakespeare, The Tempest is the only play that's wholly original, right? I mean, there's parts of Pericles, there's the witches and Macbeth. And at the end, when Prospero sets Ariel free, right, so it's the Tinkerbell-like figure, and Caliban, remember, is the cave-dwelling club, he's like a platypus, he stinks, he's this vile thing, and everyone's liberated to go off and get married, and he liberates Ariel, and he points to Caliban, he's alone on the island, he says, "This thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine." And it's so moving, because he's saying that he will integrate the part that is the most vile and disgusting and own it as a part of himself.
You think that's part of that journey through the veil of tears back to innocence? Well, that's certainly part of this. It's part of the structure of the biblical narrative, certainly. That's necessary.
You can't get off free. You can't just be Ariel. You can't just be Tinkerbell. You can't just be Peter Pan. You have to integrate. You have to integrate the shadow.
So I have a question for those, because one of the mysteries to me in the text is the blood on the posts. Why do they have to put blood on the post? I understand it's a mark, but it's like this mark of blood. Is there in Jewish tradition a connection between putting the blood on the post and the other sacrificial sacrifices, where they either have to put the blood on the corners of the altar, or they would use the blood to purify the different elements of the temple?
So this is probably not known. I may well be known at this table, but I don't think for the general public. Because in the West, we identify blood with death, and in the Torah, blood is identified with life. Which it is. And by the way, it says it in Genesis. One of the few times that there is a law in Genesis, you may not eat the blood, ki hadam hu anefesh, because the blood is the soul of the living thing.
Yeah, but I think for Christians it's the same. Like we wouldn't say things like we're saved by the blood of Christ if we didn't believe that it was life that was poured over us.
He was
so welcome.
Also, as a symbol, I mean, it's
I didn't say that. I just said he was Jewish.
No, but I'm curious about this idea of putting the blood on the post. If you had
yes, that's what about it. It's affirming life.
Okay.
Yes, and sparing it. We can't eat blood because, as Jacob Milgram puts it, the carcass you can have, but the blood goes back to God.
Well, you could... Sorry, Stephen.
I was just going to say that very simply, the posts are also kind of structural, right? I mean, the posts are the thing holding up at least that part of the house, but also it's the thing that is making possible the entry and exit from the home. And so there must be a serious symbol here of that being the place, the sanctifying place of the home itself in a profound... At least it's the
The
And
door
it's-
certainly
it's-
stands for the house in some sense.
But
Right?
it stands for the transition. It's the
Yes.
threshold is one of the most important, like
Yeah.
traditional symbolism, universal symbolism, as this transition between the inside and the outside. And so putting the blood on the outside of the house, it could be something like that. Like it really is this. It's like it ends up being an act of protection. It's like we're putting this life
and
outside
as Oz pointed
to
out, an
protect us
act
from
of
death.
faith. It's an act of faith. It's very important. That was a great point, by the way, that if
Well, if God wasn't
didn't
on the side of
smite,
the Jews, he'd sure know where they
then,
were.
Hey, a Jew lives here, and we're in trouble.
But it's a symbol that anticipates the second Passover, because I think there are two Passovers. There's the first Passover,
Yes.
where right?
Well, the second one is if you miss the first.
right.
It's very interesting law. In case you were out of town, you really have a chance at a second one.
But I mean, the second Passover through the people of Israel pass over the Red Sea. That is to say.
You mean? You didn't mean literally.
No,
that
so
there is a second Passover
parts. That's right.
in Numbers. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's because Jews are always late.
There's also
All non-wasps are late. That's a funny thing I realize. One of the reasons I am a waspophile.
Part of white privilege.
I love it. I am a waspophile. I think this is a great invention, the Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I really do. They made the greatest country in the world. What else can I say? And so everybody thinks Jews are late, and they go, "Oh, Jewish Standard Time." Then I, in my interaction with other communities, Armenians, Armenian Standard Time, Iranian Standard Time. Then I realize every bloody group except white Anglo-Saxon Protestants is late.
We're hoping you guys will catch up, man.
I love it. When things start on time, I show up at speeches differently if ethnics invite me or if it's a Presbyterian church that invites me.
It also just one last point about the lintel. There's no, like, it's the way into the house, right? So you can't not see it when you're coming in. Right. It's a bit like the mark on the forehead. I mean, Ash Wednesday or something. It's like it's not sort of hidden over here. It's not a tattoo central. You can't see. It's not in the back of the house. Oh, I didn't happen to see it. No, it's like right there.
Yeah. But Dennis, I've got to say, I've never seen a satisfactory Jewish explanation of sacrifice. You know, even my great hero, people like Leon Kass and Rabbi Sachs, they sort of say it was a concession from paganism, and I've never seen a really positive expression.
Yeah. To weaning people away from human sacrifice is no question that's part of it. And Isaiah says, in the name of God, the truth is I really don't need your sacrifices. I need you just to behave well towards human beings. So I have no problem with seeing that as a stopgap measure.
It's a transition.
Yes, I
think that's true historically.
Yeah, I do.
Bringing about the end of sacrifice.
I'm sorry?
You think there's a dynamic movement away from sacrifice towards its abolition?
Right.
Well, no, towards its transformation into a spiritual sacrifice.
Well, after AD 70, it became prayer, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's right.
Prayer replaced sacrifice.
Yes. Well, that's also, Hosea. The murmurings of your lips will substitute for the sacrifice of calves.
Well, and it is a sacrifice, because if the prayer is done in a spirit of repentance, then what you're sacrificing is the tyrant. That's what you're doing.
Every religious person is a truly religious person, and you
That's
embody
true.
this from your great answer to me at the PragerU event, which you have no idea. I've written about it. I've talked about it. When I asked you,
I don't even remember it.
I know you don't.
unfortunately.
I know. Well, I've written. I actually had transcribed your answer to my question to you. Do you believe in God? And I haven't memorized it, but I memorized the gist when you said you can't say yes because who can say yes? Because the demands upon you, if you believe in God, are so immense. You have no idea how that moved me to the core of my soul. And I realized I built on that in my own thinking. Most people who say they believe in God, that's why I said to you in the beginning, it's a celestial butler. It isn't God as the God who demands from us so much. So all religious life is sacrifice if it's done properly.
No, that's true. But Christians take sacrifice to quite a different level, don't we?
Well, an additional level, I think, yeah.
Well, there's a different conceptualization of it. I mean, it seems to me that the Jews, at least in part, the sacrifice on the Jewish side at least to some degree, tends to be played out at the tribal level, at the group level, and I'm wondering about that constantly. Is like, because there are sacrifices if the individual is the central part of the cosmic order, but then there's the groups that we're also embedded in. They're also central parts of the cosmic order, and so then there's a proper way of being constituted as a light unto the nations, let's say, and then there's a proper level at which the sacrifice has to take place at the level of the state. And it seems to me maybe that the Jews in some sense focus more on that, and the Christians focus more on the sacrifice at the level of the individual, and that there might be some nice way of...
No, I didn't mean that. I mean, the heart of the faith is the sacrifice of Jesus. And that's why we take it fundamentally seriously. Yes. And for us, the Old Testament points towards something bigger and better and deeper.
Right, which is why you're not thrilled with just as a stopgap measure to get us away from human sacrifice.
No.
I understand that, because you want it to have an intrinsic meaning beyond that, which it does, by the way.
Right,
There's
but it's a voluntary
The
human
Hebrew word for
sacrifice
sacrifice is korban, and it comes, almost every Hebrew word is 3 letters, and then you build on it for verbs and for other nouns. The 3-letter basis of the Hebrew word sacrifice, kuf resh bet, means get close. So that's a very big giveaway.
Atonement, at-one-ment, restoration.
Well, get close
of
to
the
God.
relationship. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it is a sacrifice, because if you're, partly what you're doing when you're praying, if you do it in a spirit of humility, is that you're willing, it really is that you're willing to abandon the internal tyrant and to move towards a more inclusive order that pulls in something that's transcendent into that which is you. And I would say not only any act of prayer that's true prayer is that, but I would say any true act of thought or dialogue is that. Because what we're all doing here is we're offering up as sacrifices, in some real sense, our own opinions. Right? That's why we're able to have this conversation. It's like no one here thinks they're absolutely right. And so you're going to take the risk of being changed. And that's especially when you know that the thoughts themselves are an animating spirit, and that that's actually something that's alive. You are definitely sacrificing that. And without that, there is no movement closer to God, to that which is transcendent.
If I may, I just want to add one more thing to my thought about every religious life means sacrifice. I'm avoiding this whole seminar as much of the contemporary world as possible, lest it sound political. But if a religious pastor, priest, or rabbi cares about what the secular world thinks about them, then they have compromised. You have to sacrifice popularity to be religious.
You have to sacrifice the political to be religious.
Everything. So you'll decide whether to keep this in or not. The obedience to irrational secular authority during the lockdown periods in the Western world by churches and synagogues depressed me beyond words, because it was done without, except in a handful of cases of remarkable rabbis, priests, and ministers, they did not risk the non-popularity with the New York Times or Washington Post or their local newspaper. I really believe that. The condemnations that any church that stayed open during a time when you didn't have to really close, the condemnations of those churches was a sacrifice on the part of those pastors or priests or rabbis.
Yeah, it was actually, in this context, it's perfect, because it was Israel saying Pharaoh first, God second. And that's what it was.
It really upset you?
Oh, it upset me. In Quebec, it was crazy, because they came to the point, I actually preferred when they closed down the churches. At some point, they asked for vaccination passports in the churches. And I think, honestly, and to this day, that the churches that use the vaccination passports, I don't think they're going to make it. I don't think they're going to survive.
I agree with you.
Because to put the state above God, that's right.
They were tested and they failed.
That's right.
But
I really do
almost
believe
since
that.
the Enlightenment, if you just use the one respectability, has been incredibly important to the attenuation of faith. You know, you want to be respectable to the intellectual community or whatever.
That's right.
Respectability
Yes.
has been really incredible.
That's
in
Kierkegaard.
They
Christian
adopted shame
compromise.
culture over moral culture.
But in here you see it because Pharaoh says, oh, you can go sacrifice to God. Just do it the way that I tell you to do it. If you do it the way I tell you to do it, it's fine, I'll let you go. And it's like, no, God comes before the state. You know, we listen to the rules, but it's like, yeah, there's a hierarchy that got messed up in COVID, that's for sure.
So so when you're talking about offering one's opinion up, right? So why that's a sacrifice in some regards is you're willing to sacrifice a part of your world order to change. That's another thing about, you know, one of the things that we're finding again in the contemporary cultural and political realm is when people are existing basically in circles where they've unfriended anybody with any differences, there's no sacrifice in the engagement at all. Right? There's only sacrifice in the sense that you're saying of the use of discourse, right? Of the ability to be changed if you're having conversations. Like everybody at this table comes to the text from a very different perspective. And in order to have anything that's meaningful, if we're saying that anything that's meaningful has to come with sacrifice, and
well, as warped as the emphasis on diversity tends to be, the positive element at its core is the notion that a diverse range of perspectives should be brought to the table.
Well, that's true diversity, right? I mean, we have definitional collapse. Like diversity doesn't mean the same thing to many people that it does, but true diversity.
It's a collapse of terminology that trumpets diversity at the cost of the sacrifice of diversity. So, all right. So
Can I ask Greg one question?
Please do.
Uh-oh.
It is an uh-oh. So I saw your misgivings, and you were. I understand why you didn't want to get into a protracted discussion. So I just have a question, and it's obviously you don't have to answer it, but my answer will be implied by the question. So if, God forbid, there was a Nazi regime in the United States executing Jews wherever they could be found, you're a Jew. Would you more likely, if you could ask a Christian to hide you, would you more likely ask a pastor whose church was closed during COVID, or who defied the authorities and kept it open?
I would more likely go with whoever engaged with the strength of their convictions and were willing to enable a conversation that was an accommodation of both sides and brought that community into resonance.
I'm sorry. Okay, you're right. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, and brought that community into resonance with the culture. And for me, there's a complicated middle ground in this that could be negotiated about what the responsibilities of the community are.
But you only have the choice. You're a Jew seeking shelter. You only know two things. This church obeyed the authorities. This church defied the authorities. Which pastor would you think was more likely to hide you?
But
you can't say there's a middle. You can say there's a middle ground. All right, so you'd say you'd flip a coin. I'm not putting you on the spot.
Let me give you. I don't mind being put on the spot, but here's an example for you. If somebody's reason to defy the authorities are because, right, to show up the liberal elite and it's a performative act, that's not anybody whose moral judgment that I would trust. And if somebody obeyed the authorities by having a discussion with their church and their community and saying, here's where we are, here's where the hospitals are overwhelmed, it's going to be incredibly...
So you're defying the proposition in the question that the mere defiance of authority is a sufficient marker to indicate trustworthiness. Right. So it would be a coin flip in that case.
Oh, okay. I would go to the church that defied the irrational. I believe that's key. I have no problem with obedience to rational secular authority. I have every problem with obedience to irrational secular authority. I run Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur services every year. I ran services during 2021. I couldn't find a venue in 2020. I would have run them then. You didn't have to come. You could wear a mask if you came. But I am not going to stop services on the basis of what I now know was irrationality. Because I was told so by the CDC or the governor of my state, and other governors allowed places to be open. So I know whom I would ask to hide me if I only knew the activity of that church during this period.
I likewise have an equal disdain for an irrationality of secularism, but I have a great respect for people who are willing to engage on the basis with the community to make a non-coerced choice of what might be happening based on hospitals and the sick and elderly in their community.
But it was a coerced
informed
choice. You cannot come to this church or synagogue. That was coerced.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to call time and go back to the text. So,
We're almost done.
and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And that's a promise that God makes to the Israelites under very, what would you call it, challenging conditions. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. And I think that's where we'll close today. That's 12:14. And thank you, gentlemen, for your participation today. And thank you to all of those who are watching and listening. And thanks once again to the Daily Wire Plus people and to the production crew who've worked so hard and expended so many resources to make this possible. And gentlemen, we will convene again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Israel is standing between two pillars. Those two pillars are holding the Egyptians away, right? So think about it in architectural terms, right? These two things that are holding up, think about the cosmic pillars that are holding up the heavens.
And so
whatever.
because they're properly positioned between these two pillars, they're also resistant
That's
to
right.
the tyrant.
Yeah.
What does that mean, that they went out with a high hand? Is it that because they were carrying treasure? Is it because they went out triumphantly? Anyone know?
I think it's the high hand of God.
This is something the Greek fathers like to come back to again and again, that actually the cloud, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, and the pillar of fire are really metaphors for the sort of combination between the accessibility and the difficulty of Scripture, that God, as it were, and God himself, the talk and thought about God. God is clouded, as it were, is in a cloud of unknowing. It's difficult to understand and difficult to think about his nature.